The following is a conversation with Nikki Peever and Claire Wilson. Nikki Peever is the Director of Cybersecurity at CAUDIT and brings a wealth of experience in developing and delivering cybersecurity initiatives for the Australasian higher education and research sector. Alongside with Nikki, we have Claire Wilson, who is the Manager of Cybersecurity Culture at the University of Queensland. Together, we'll be exploring the intersection of cybersecurity and society, discussing why cybersecurity matters to everyone, and how collaboration and knowledge can strengthen our collective defenses against cyber threats. Thank you, Nikki and Claire, for donating your time. Subscribe to the Bytes podcast for more conversations like this.
Welcome, Claire and Nikki. So grateful to have you on the pod. Claire, I'm going to go to you first. So let's talk about why should individuals care about cybersecurity and why is it impacting everyone's daily lives at the moment?
Hi, thank you for inviting me along. So we live in a digital world, and as we are all integrating more technology into our lives, our attack surface is growing, which is, the number of possible weak points which can be exploited. So if you think about the average person, they're on social media, they're probably shopping online. The Internet of Things is growing massively. So that's your smart speakers, your security cameras, your smart fridges. So everything which is connected to the internet, and they're all, all connected to the internet. Are they all secure? So can threat actors access them, or, and if they access them, can they then get access to your home network? Now, I'm not trying to scare people, but we obviously all just need to be aware of this. And as individuals, we need to protect our personal information, our finances, our privacy. And if that information is compromised, then that can obviously lead to financial loss, fraud, identity theft, which obviously has a huge impact on individuals. And it's also just not about protecting our individual information and protecting ourselves. It's also, we all play an important part in protecting the organizations which we work for. So if we're all aware of cybersecurity and the role that we play, it can help us all stay safer online and help protect the organizations as well.
Absolutely. I often hear people saying, I don't need to worry. I mean, why would anyone hack me? I'm not a valuable target.
I'm too small to be a target.
I'm too small. Why would anyone waste their time? And I think what a lot of people potentially don't realize is that no matter who you are, if you're working somewhere or if you're, part of a club or something, you have access beyond what a regular citizen individual would have. Whether you work at a workplace that has access, if you're an employee at JB Hi-Fi, you have more access to JB Hi-Fi's material data assets than a customer of JB Hi-Fi. And so those things can make you a target. And I think in the protecting everyone, that impact goes both to their personal lives and to their work lives, where you can really see threat actors try and take advantage of personal identities to infiltrate workplaces and vice versa. So it's really about being cognizant of how your identity is being used and where it can be leveraged against yourself, I suppose.
Yes, that naivety, isn't it? Like, if you're going about your day, this is a regular employee, all those social engineering tactics can get you, and you won't even know what's happening.
Exactly.
Nikki, what are some simple kind of steps that you think people can take to protect themselves online? In speaking to Claire's point around we can all be targeted, do you think that there's a way that people can protect themselves without feeling overwhelmed by that complexity of the cyber and the technical kind of, I don't know too much about it?
Absolutely, Benny. Absolutely, Benji. So the most people are going to be targeted by cyber criminals, right? They're financially motivated. They're there to make money. And you've got to think about these people, they're operating like real businesses. So they have HR, they have accounts, they post job ads online. They also hire psychologists, right? And they're using these psychological techniques to get people to click on malicious links or send them money. That's their motivation. So if anything, if you get an unexpected text message, unexpected email, unexpected phone call, and it's got a sort of sense of urgency or intimidation or fear around it, have a breath, take a minute. Nothing's that urgent to click and just think about it. I think that's probably the simplest thing you can do. Just take a step back and think about when you're getting these emails and texts. I like to say be a bit professionally paranoid,
A cognitive break.
Sorry, what was that, Beck?
A cognitive break, like take a step back, have a think about what they're asking you to do.
Perfect. That's exactly right. You know, is Leonardo DiCaprio really writing to borrow $2,000 from you? You know, is that legitimate? Have a think about it. And what we
hard times, Nikki. I mean, I'm more than happy to help.
Yeah, I'm well past his 25-year-old cutoff, but you know, maybe one day. And then, you know, once you've kind of covered that and you feel pretty confident that you can spot something malicious, you've got to look at using strong, complex passwords, maybe a password manager. I've heard of people having password manager parties within their family, and they all get together and they all set up a password manager. And, you know, doing it with a group really will help. The next stage of that is what Claire was alluding to, just being aware of the information you're putting out there. You know, when you're signing up to a forum or a mailing list, do they really need your social security number or your passport, you know, copy of your passport? Just be aware of what you're putting out there. In Australia, we see, I think, romance scams and business email compromises are the two biggest ones. So business email compromises where they're in someone's email account and they might send an invoice and they intercept it and change the account details. So if you're making a big payment, I would always call and just validate with the person that those banking details are correct. And obviously the romance scams, again, being a little bit just paranoid, making sure you're meeting people in real life. If someone's asking you for money, be a bit cautious around that. And then the last point I thought I'd just touch on here, if you are compromised or if you do fall victim to something, please don't be ashamed about it. It's easy to kind of get stuck in the loop with that sunk cost fallacy. You've already given them $2,000. What's another $2,000? And don't feel ashamed about that. You know, criminals, they're making money by doing this. They're really good at it. They're just going to try again and again. So they just need to get it right once. You just need to make one mistake once, right? And then you're a victim. It's not your fault. Don't be scared to get support. ACSC, asking a trusted family or friend, just to get yourself out of that hole is what you should be doing.
Your university support resources, things of that nature, because they can have impacts beyond just the $2,000 that you pay around, you know, if that data gets exfiltrated or, you know, if you happen to share it to someone accidentally that shouldn't have access to that information. Being upfront and accountable for some of the very genuine human errors that can cause some of these things is actually much better a way to protect everyone than trying to scuttlebutt it away and be like, no one will know. I'll just kind of, you know, take that one on the chin.
You know, confronting that shame and speaking out about it can help other people because it happens a lot more than you think it does. And if everyone keeps it a secret and keeps it to themselves, then everyone's going to keep it to themselves because they think, oh, nobody I know has had this happen, or I've never seen it in the news or anything like that. So it becomes that, like, you know, singular shame. So people have to go, no, I'm not the one who did the wrong thing here. They are back in the criminal's hands.
Absolutely. And it's just you're a victim, honestly, you know, these are criminals. This is what they do. And you should be getting support and not feeling embarrassed about that. It does happen to the best of us, right?
You know, in a similar analogy, like STDs have a level of stigma around them. However, you'd kind of need to address it and inform people of the fact that you have succumbed to those, you know, real life viruses rather than the digital ones. And then kind of take that onto into changing your behavior in the future. So it's not about saying, well, you shouldn't have done that. It's about understanding what caused it and then moving forward from it in an empathetic, understanding fashion. Claire, universities are often targeted by cyber actors, generally due to their large and valuable intellectual property and swaths of sensitive research data. Do you find that there are unique challenges that higher institutions face to protect those assets?
Yeah, so universities and higher education institutions, they often work in open, collaborative environments, which obviously creates lots of vulnerabilities. They often have a very complex environment, complex IT infrastructure. Normally, they have lots of legacy equipment, and they have a really diverse user base. So there's academics, there's researchers, professional staff, students, alumni, you know, all needing to access the network. And that's often from a real sort of a variety of locations, a variety of devices. So that creates a really broad attack surface. And often with universities, there's a resource constraint. So I know from my perspective, working in culture, trying to ensure everyone knows about cybersecurity risks and how to protect themselves, it's no small task. So yeah, there's lots of tricky things in the environment. I think to mitigate the risks, universities need to find a balance between having open access and then also having enough security in place. But they also need to identify what's important to them. We're not going to be able to protect everything. So, we really need to know, and everybody in that organization needs to know what's important, and then we can really protect that one thing or those few things. And obviously there's lots of technology controls which can help with that, but technology is not enough by itself. From a cybersecurity culture perspective, we have to focus on the people. We have to build what I call a human firewall, raise awareness, uplift the cybersecurity knowledge of everybody in the university community. And that way, that's how we can keep the university safer. And that's not just about running simulated phishing campaigns, which most people associate with cybersecurity awareness. There's lots of other things you can do with leadership engagement. Talking and building a champions network is amazing. You can run presentations, workshops, you can offer targeted training, run awareness campaigns. There's lots of things you can do if you've got the resources to do them. And I think really importantly is collaboration with other universities and higher education institutions. That can really help, because by working together, sharing ideas and best practices, we're all introduced to new ways of thinking and new ways of working, and we can all gain this like a deeper understanding of what the potential threats are and what our role is in preventing them.
Yeah,
and I might just jump in here. Sorry, Beck. To kudos to Claire, who has championed a university network of all the universities across Australia and New Zealand and their awareness folks. And Claire obviously has maybe more resources at UQ than someone such as Avondale that have, less than a third of the student. And so they're big universities are supporting the small, and Claire's the leader of this. They meet every month, they share their ideas. She's doing an amazing job. And so the big universities are here uplifting the small, and I think that's really impressive.
I think
And
it speaks.
just back on that, it was Nikki that helped set it up. So kudos to Nikki. Yes.
And I was going to say, I think this speaks to the kind of cultural shift that is occurring around some of the awareness around cyber from an organizational perspective is now that is seen as let's empower these roles and these teams to then share that knowledge across not just the institute, but cross institutionally as well. That kind of core of the hacker mentality sentiment where all this is spawned out of is no one knows everything. We kind of teach everyone a little bit to uplift everyone's skill set in areas. It's very reminiscent to me of that, where no one knows everything. You have to, united in knowledge makes us stronger, really.
That's why you need an active human firewall, not a passive one. So you're right, just doing simulations isn't going to cut it. Everyone has to have that mentality of what can I contribute? And how can I spread awareness, even if it is that just one piece of knowledge that I have.
How much is harnessing the passion existing within the workforce to then propel the rest of the workforce to be interested? How important is that, do you think, in finding those core champions, if you will, or people that are interested in making this part of the core consideration of culture?
For me?
Whoever wants to take it.
Oh. Okay, well, I can talk to that from my perspective. We do have a champions network at UQ, and it's massively important. So they are super engaged. They really want to help. We meet once a month, and we share ideas, and they collaborate together. And so we have a Champion of the Month award, so we can promote all the good work that they're doing and give them some recognition for what they're doing, and they get a prize each month. But they're really great. In fact, I'll just share this with you because it just came in a few minutes before this conversation. I got an email of what they're doing in one of the schools, and the champions there. They're quite a close-knit working group. I'm not sure this would work in most areas, but they. If anyone leaves their screen unlocked, what they do is they've got danger. So that's like, the strap things that goes around, and they put it around the desk.
Yeah.
danger, and then they say, why we we're going to just look at the area, see whether it's been infiltrated by any strangers, see we're going to do fingerprint testing and things like this. So this is what they're doing, and they want to be nominated for Cyber Champion of the Month. So I actually think they're going to win it hands down next month.
I love that idea.
It's great. And they've taken a picture to share. So like I say, you have to be on good terms with your colleagues to do that kind of thing, but it's a great initiative. So
that's really good, because it's bringing a bit of fun into it as well, without saying gotcha. Like, it's like, oh, you did a bad thing. It's more of like a, oh, okay, let's get out the forensics. Let's see what we had to do.
Absolutely. It made us all chuckle anyway. So
that's good. Keeping it fun, I think, like, spurs on the champion sort of side of it, makes people want to do it.
Totally. And on that kind of note of keeping it fun and collaborative, I mean, can either of you share an example of another type of successful collaboration that occurred between different sectors, whether that be like government and industry or academia and government, that's kind of uplifted the cybersecurity outcomes for the organization more broadly, or organizations more broadly?
There are so many. I'm really glad you asked that. Maybe 10 years ago, people weren't talking to each other. I think 10, 15 years ago, I remember the IT security officer that I worked with, he used to joke that his job was so easy, he just said no to everything and everyone, and that was all he had to do. But now we just have such great engagement with government and industry. One example is what the Department of Home Affairs have set up, TISN groups, so trusted information sharing networks across all critical infrastructure sectors. And so these are sector-specific groups, but then the chairs of each of the groups meet monthly via Zoom to share what we're seeing within our sectors. And this isn't obviously just cyber. This is stemming to anything relating to critical infrastructure. So copper theft, for example, or phone tower sabotage. So it is a bit wider than just cyber, but any threats to critical infrastructure. And then on top of that, we had an in-person meeting earlier this year where we did like a speed dating. So each sector kind of met with another sector at a table for a few minutes and spoke about their dependencies.
I love that.
Yeah, it was
just by having the conversation, you realize a lot more than having policies placed on you, and then you have to read 15-page documents around an industry you're not familiar with. Let's just have a human conversation around the things that we're prioritizing.
Exactly, yeah. And you can imagine some sectors like energy data, everyone's depending on those ones. And then there's others like mining or gas that are maybe less, but you'd be surprised at the dependencies. It was funny when health and education, we were at the table together, and health said, oh, we're not dependent on higher education, but you think about all the hospital networks and the research. So just a 5-minute conversation.
Placements.
Yeah, exactly. So within 5 minutes, we said, oh, yes, we better be collaborating more. So that was a fabulous exercise run through DHA, CSIRO, and the REAG. And then the last example I'll share is the recent CrowdStrike blue screen of death incident. So again, facilitated through the government, but with all of the industry and academics in the room. We had that Friday evening at 6 p.m. NCM meeting where we spoke about what was happening, and each of the different industries spoke about the supply chain implications. So food and grocery, for example, they spoke about potential delays due to picking technology being impacted, and it was just fabulous. And we met daily for several days after the incident. So, it's happening constantly. It maybe isn't out there as much in the public eye, but I just think we've evolved so much in the last probably 5 years, and I definitely see good things in the future continuing.
Even pointing to something that you kind of said at the start around my information security officer, like all of this was InfoSec at one point, right? And now is a whole nother kind of field on top of that of cybersecurity, which encompasses that human error. It's not just the technical controls. It's all about the people of it all, the society that actually has to adhere to these technical controls and comply with, the best practices, if you will. Do you want to ask this one? The foreign interference one?
Yeah. So earlier on, we were talking about how universities are targeted in specific ways and how you need to prioritize what's important to protect, as well as, how to protect it. So, Nikki, we know that foreign interference is a huge thing in academic institutions, and it's becoming a growing concern, so much so that it's become a bit more common knowledge now. So Mike Burgess from ASIO sort of highlighted this the other week in his sort of speech. So how can you balance that need for again, talking about international collaboration or even local collaboration and trying to safeguard against it, because it's still a human concept with social engineering versus technical, but it becomes sort of a bigger thing when you think about how foreign interference works.
Yeah, really great question, Beck. So the geopolitical landscape, it's really very complicated. So you've got foreign influence and interference, and they're quite tricky topics to cover. I mean, when you think about it, frankly, all governments are kind of spying on each other to a degree, right? You've got Five Eyes, and I mean, it's good governance. You want to get some threat intel before you're potentially bombed or there's something happening to your country, right? So we kind of accept that as to protect the country, but then there's some countries that they cross, what we would see as ethical lines. So, we've seen cases of people stepping off a flight in a potential high-risk country and the local law enforcement demanding they unlock their device and part with the data. And, if you're not aware that may happen to you, it can be quite confronting to be in a situation like that. You also see, people maybe based in Australia, but their friends and family are in a high-risk country and they're taken in by local law enforcement or the military to get information on the people that aren't, in Australia or get access. So it's a really delicate space. And it's not only just, interfering or you're also looking at, there's been research outcomes that have been compromised, and it could just be you change the building temperature in a lab and it compromises, a medical trial. Crazy to think about that. And
light, and that's not something people think about, something as tiny as, well, it's not tiny in obviously that circumstance, but it's not what most people think of as a cyber attack.
No, and there's this right and wrong balance. There's this, really tricky technical law ethic triangle that we're always trying to get right. And I mean, I'm not saying not everyone in these high-risk countries is malicious, but we need to understand that in these countries, there's laws that their citizens must comply with, right? And whether or not they want to, but there's data policy laws and whatnot that their governments are putting onto them. And so they're just different laws than we would expect to have to comply with. So as an academic, I think what you need to be aware of is your research is important. You want to be the one publishing it. You want to be the one getting grants. You want to be the one getting credit for that work. If you're traveling, you need to protect that. That's your baby. That's your life's work, right? If you're going to these high-risk countries, use burner devices, right? Don't take information you don't need to take. Think about even supply chain. So if you're working with someone or you're procuring a software or something, you should look at their company structure, and you'd be quite surprised. It might be branded as a New Zealand company, but the actual ownership,
where that ownership is.
Yeah. So just the awareness, I think, is quite important, and lovely to travel all around the world and show your research everywhere. And that's fabulous. But that awareness over high-risk countries and just chatting to your local IT teams about your policies around where this data is going to go.
It is really interesting in that it's almost antithetical to the whole open collaboration, free sharing of information that universities kind of pride themselves on, are predicated on. But it goes against, I guess, the sentiment of doing it coercively against the national interests of Australia, things like that. I mean, in my cursory research and prep for other episodes that we've done for this, things like Operation Shady Rat, where, in the 2010s, a lot of state-sponsored actors were looking particularly to leverage IP from universities in Western countries for Asian countries and their economies. And yeah, the results were like pretty outstanding for the countries as far as like GDP growth and innovations that came out of it. But it's all kind of been off the back of this kind of coercive tactic of getting that information in a way that wasn't really sanctioned or approved. Do you think that there's, beyond being conscious of it, is there much else academics can do to protect their research and in recognizing, I suppose, not only the value of their research, but the information that they simply have in their head, like who not to share it with, who not to consider having conversations with? Yeah. And that's the thing. I feel like it's more the casual being a human wanting to share something you're interested in is what would catch you out than someone stops you at the airport and tells you to
at a conference. It's like, oh, by the way, I'm also looking at that. And, it's these tiny little tidbits can, it's like dangling a bit of bait.
There's definitely a bit like they appear as though they're legitimately interested, but they are gathering intelligence, right? And I think that's the crux of foreign interference, is that coercive element to it.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, it's tricky, right? We don't want to prevent people from showcasing their research, and we have some great relationships with the Canadian universities, US. We actually share a collective third-party product with the Canadian universities and all work together. There is in Australia a group called INFIN, which is run by the universities, by the people in the university responsible for foreign interference. And we meet regularly and talk about the policies and talk about what's going on. And this group actually connecting with the US version of the group. And so we are sort of sharing these proper procedures and processes to make sure that they're appropriate for academics to still do their jobs, but also balance that the data, protection. So in terms of what academics can do, I mean, I hate when people say this, I'm about to say it myself, but think about your crown jewels. I hate when people say that, but think about what's most important. And it's, probably that actual data that you have there. If you're doing, if you're interviewing people and you're talking about sensitive health information or, abortion data, or you're talking about their well-being and things like that, that might be sensitive. You want to make sure that that is protected in a, some way you're not taking that around with you, but also anonymized. And when I say anonymize, I don't mean just anonymize the transcript and then keep in the same folder an Excel document with their name and what that relates to. I mean, actually think about protecting your participants' information. And that to me is your crown jewels, that information. And that's what you've got to protect more than everything. Other than that, feel free to talk about what you're doing and what you're working in, but think about what, is really that crown jewels of your research piece and keep that tightly protected.
And to that point as well, Nikki, it's something you mentioned earlier on people using password managers. It's also about using a password manager in the correct way, right? So you've de-identified the data, but in the same folder, there's the non-de-identified data. That's kind of not best practice. Having a password manager is great, but if you use the same password for everything and store that in the password manager, I mean, the password manager kind of is really just a false confidence thing. So it's about the understanding what is the best practice for the end goal you're trying to achieve. What are those crown jewels? How do I best protect those things specifically? To that point, Claire, do you find that as cybersecurity becomes more of a societal issue and kind of beyond higher ed specifically and more of an employability requisite, do you think that everyone now is almost expected to have a level of cyber understanding, education, training, ability to be in the digital world now?
Yes, absolutely. It's no longer just needed within IT, is it? Most organizations are now relying on technology. We've seen a huge rise in cyber attacks. So it just means that employees of all levels need at least a basic understanding of cybersecurity best practices. And often, many industries, they face strict regulations regarding cybersecurity and data protection. So the employees need to understand those regulations and ensure they're adhered to. It's really difficult, and we've got to make sure that everyone gets this education and training, which is tricky. But I'm thinking if we could teach it in primary and secondary schools, like basic cybersecurity, have it as part of the curriculum. I know at my children's school, they have external companies that come in and warn children about how to keep themselves safe online and things like that. But, if it was actually part of the curriculum, we can build awareness from a really young age, because these kids these days, they're very tech savvy. I know my kids are more tech savvy than me, but when it comes to staying safe, not at all. They will happily give away everything online because, they don't understand the dangers. But, we just need to create this level of awareness. So, governments could run awareness campaigns to educate the general public. I know they already do, but, if they really up their game and helped people stay safe online, if we could see some free workshops being offered in the community, maybe like at libraries or something like that, where people are being educated on cybersecurity. There's lots of people out there that I don't believe really understand the impact there is to them. There's lots of things we can do. If we enhance individual cybersecurity awareness, we can make our communities a lot more cyber resilient.
It's about coming to people at the what's in it for me, I feel. It's what a lot of friendly phishing training is centered around, that human-centered design. Like, I'm telling you about MFA, great. I know what MFA is and like how it'll stop a hacker, but like, why do I care? Because it takes me 30 seconds to bring up the thing and type in my code every time. So you need to justify that to me as to why should I do that?
I love the password manager parties thing there that you said before, Nikki. I think that's a really cool way of championing even groups of individuals, like, you know, your friend group or, you know, your mother's group or, you know, and at work, obviously. I think that's a fun way of doing it. Like, all right, everyone, let's buckle down and get this done.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's actually Shelley at UQ that did that, I think, for her 30th birthday. Was it Claire? So she started
that's
amazing.
What a way to have your 30th.
No, put it on the activity list for every milestone birthday from now on, I think.
Yes.
It also highlights to me the collective acknowledgement that our information and identities are valuable, in that, like, if we come together as a group and we're going to all set sophisticated passwords that are unique to an account collectively as a group, we are, in theory, not going to be able to be leveraged against one another. A threat actor couldn't assume one of our identities, infiltrate our inbox, and then start, to your point of BC, Nikki, around like taking over accounts and representing them as though they're my views when they're actually a threat actor. It helps everyone ensure their most precious asset, their identity, their trust that they've cultivated with others is secure. And I think that's a really amazing initiative to kind of highlight, and is probably the foundation of what creates, I would venture a guess, a lot of those successful security awareness initiatives. Have you found success or varying levels of success depending on the audience at the universities around how they find adoption of security awareness programs and the buy-in for it?
Yes. So once we can get on their agenda for their all staff meeting, which is how we go about it, then we're good, because we literally present to them on personal cyber safety. It's all about what's in it for them. It's not about protecting the university at all. The way we see it is, if they can look after themselves, have good cyber hygiene, then they will bring that to the workplace as well. So once we get in, then we're fine. It's the getting in the door. They hear cybersecurity and think, not really, not for me. But we have different tactics. Sorry, Beck.
It's one more thing to think about. So I think most people are quite busy or quite stressed as it is.
Oh, it is. It's horrendous.
And adding that extra layer of responsibility.
Absolutely. But how we're trying to sell it is, you know, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, maybe no one locked their front doors. Now everyone pretty much does. So we're trying to see it in the same way. You've just got to start trying to change your behavior, and it's just small steps. You don't have to, you know, we're not going to give them a list of 20 things that they have to do. It's, you know, we concentrate on 4 things to help them stay safe, and they don't have to do all 4, but, you know, just that's the 4. And so it feels manageable. And then if obviously people want to know more, there's information where they can go to town, you know, make yourselves really secure. So yeah, but it is difficult with the limited resources.
And I guess the wide nature of different roles and their responsibilities, like if you're a researcher, you'll likely have to engage in a lot more due diligence processes than, a lecturer that doesn't do research, for example. So there's like another layer of considerations, and as Beck pointed out, things that you have to do as part of your job by acknowledging that that's a thing I should be doing.
Building a habit is quite hard, even if it is for your best interests. Starting small is the way to go. You see people... to sort of liken it to, you know, becoming healthy. People change their diet, start an exercise program, start meditating all at once. And of course, there's heaps of points of failure there. So I think if you're trying to do that from a cyber perspective, you're going to have the same result.
Absolutely. Yeah, good analogy.
As the cyber landscape kind of evolves with these threats, you know, being constantly vigilant in how they want to improve upon themselves in targeting, you know, regular civilians and getting things out of them, whether that be funds, identity, IP, any of those things. What do you think will be the emerging trends that'll have the most significant impacts for higher ed specifically, Nikki?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'm not good at predicting the future, Benji, but what we're seeing emerging right now, actually, yeah, there's some interesting deep fake stuff emerging too. I won't name the actual target of this campaign, but there was a high person in the community who was compromised, and their Facebook account was compromised, and a duplicate made added all their friends and started video calling asking for money, and they deep faked the person. It looked just like them, it sounded like them, and this person, as they were, maybe campaigning, or they often was someone that people might lend money to, that they were getting all this money sent through. Lucky, like if I ask my friends or family for money, no one would give me any. So I'm not a victim for this one, but I think this is one that maybe, this deep fake thing, it's very difficult to tell, images and videos that are real or compromised or altered. So I think that will be something that's emerging, and it could be like this financially motivated criminals we were speaking about, so the cyber criminals, or it could be the nation state that criminals that we were talking about as well. They might employ these techniques as well for the influence on interference that we were mentioning before as well.
Deployed probably quite differently as well, right? Like if you're trying to convince a finance person through a deepfake versus trying to convince a wider pool of civilians, it's like the tactics on how and who you choose to deepfake will change drastically.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's three kind of groups of threat actors. You've got your activists who they're generally not looking for money. They're looking to maybe for a cause. And I mean, this could be a malicious thing, or it could be something related to their own country or whatnot. But that's one sort of big group. And then you've got the nation state and then the cyber criminals. I would say the cyber criminals are what, you and I in our personal lives kind of have to worry about, but the universities have all three, right, watching their backs. So they do need to be aware of all these different techniques. AI is obviously something that's emerging, and maybe this time next year, the world's going to look quite different if we've got this large language models really improving. I've heard people talk about bot shit, which is how the AIs are generating just crap and then they're regurgitating it. So what they're printing now is useless, but we'll see how that eventuates. I thought that's an interesting perspective.
We have discussed in our previous episode, actually. It's someone coined it the Habsburg principle, and it's the idea of there's a very pronounced genetic trait that occurred in the royal family, the Habsburgs. They're a German royal family that married into so many different royal families across Europe that they actually ended up being somewhat inbred because they ended up marrying into each other. They've got a very pronounced jaw called the Habsburg jaw. And similarly, that idea has been coined for large language models and the way that they eat their own tail, ingest the information they've then produced and kind of collapse in on themselves. It's fascinating to see how everything will change with AI until it kind of reaches a point where it breaks itself. So
it just becomes nonsense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I think at current time, though, the cyber criminals can use these like ChatGPT type of platforms to help improve the language used in these scams and whatnot to make it more local language specific and maybe more convincing. But then on the adverse of that, hopefully we can use those type of technologies in our threat detection, because there is a lot of white noise, a lot of false positive type of alerts coming through. So it can be quite resource intensive to manage all of that. So hopefully, it also provides some benefit on the offensive side of this party. Yep.
Love that. I guess in looking for how organizations and individuals more broadly could develop resilience around all of these things that we're talking about. I mean, we've covered a bunch of things around be questioning of everything. Don't trust just what you see at face value. Beck and I often refer to it as bringing back stranger danger online. Trust kind of nothing unless you are proven otherwise at the outset. Are there any kind of key things that I suppose individuals, specifically the university, to your point, Claire, around it's not just about the workplace, but I suppose we are talking in a higher ed context here, that those people can consciously employ that will then pay dividends to both their personal life and workplace around resilience?
I mean, yes. So, we all need to develop resilience. So we're not going to prevent all cyber threats. I think we need to be realistic on that one. So we need to be able to detect incidents, respond to them, and then quickly recover from them. So be prepared. Plus, we also need to look at what the incident was and how we can prevent it from happening again. So there's continuous learning there. From the cybersecurity culture aspect, I guess things that can help individuals are regular threat intelligence briefings, so we can all understand that landscape, how is it changing, regular training and awareness, simulated phishing, tabletop exercises, anything that can sort of help us be prepared. So when it does happen, we know what to do. And also, collaboration with other organizations. We've mentioned it a few times, sharing information, help us all stay ahead of the threats. And we can also think more about the environments we're in and the potential risks. So we are more prepared. But mainly, cybersecurity it just needs to become known. It's everyone's responsibility. We need input and cooperation from all areas of an organization. And we also need to embed cybersecurity into all of our operations and decision makings. And onto your note previously, Beck, cybersecurity culture, it needs to become like health, safety and wellness within organizations, which is where we're headed to with UQ. If you think about health, safety and wellness, previous it was it called health and safety? And it was all about, you've left a box there, that's a danger, someone's going to trip over it and break their leg. Now it's all about, the holistic view, how to keep people well, because they know that by doing this and looking after their employees, people are probably going to take less sick days, but also, it's showing that the organization cares for its employees.
And to that point as well, like the operational health and safety protects you in both your personal life and your work life, because if you get hurt on the job, you still can't walk around in your personal life if your leg broke. So it pays both dividends. It's not a wholly workplace-based kind of thing. Do you think that as things evolve, that the kind of standard of understanding will increase as things go on?
Gosh, I hope so.
All right.
Everything is crossed. Because at the moment, I feel that often, like I was saying before, our argument is trying to get in the door and explain why people should care. But I want to be at the next level where everybody knows why they should care. Everybody's interested. Everybody's on the same page. But now we're helping everybody keep kind of raising their awareness, keeping their understanding. There's sort of, with like threat briefings and things like that, we can all sort of collaborate and help each other and know that, okay, this is now happening. So this is what we need to protect ourselves and share best practices and learnings and things like that. So yes, everything is crossed.
Yeah, I love that it all comes down to collaboration and keeping that conversation going.
Absolutely.
Keep the conversation going and rise that level of knowledge in cyber. I can't wait until everyone has that basic understanding and then we can start getting into the good stuff.
That's it, yes.
And I guess from the more kind of technical side of things, Nikki, given that you're, I guess, directing all of the cybersecurity operations for CAUDIT, how do you balance the kind of needs for those robust measures as a requirement with the concerns that people may have, whether they be about freedoms, laborious, more workloads to consider, privacy, all of those things? How does one kind of balance those two?
Another very complex question. Probably that could be a whole podcast in itself next time.
Absolutely,
but, yeah. I think we need to start thinking differently about what we're sharing digitally. Like we've touched on this a bit through all of the questions. You check into a hotel, they want to take a copy of your passport and then they put it in a folder and it's stored there for 20 years, right? And like, do they really need that there? And similarly, when you're online, you need to think about, what am I giving out? Is it necessary? But then from the organization's point, they also need to think about, what are we asking from our users? Are we giving them control of the data that we're keeping of them? Because as an organization, if you're collecting everything you can about your users, sure, it might be great for marketing and analytics, and you might be able to run, marketing campaigns from that, but you're opening your business up to potential risk, right? If that data is compromised, you're in the news tomorrow. You've got all this information you didn't need. We saw with Optus, how long they were keeping information for, and what a schmozzle that sort of erupted out to be, and Latitude had a similar issue. So, the organizations need to think about what they're collecting. But we as users have the power. If we say no to things, the organizations have to think about, well, is this necessary? There's obviously a lot of governmental change. There's changes to the Privacy Act. I think the draft exposure's written and hopefully it will be out a bit later in this year. And there's things like that, but the users should be the voice here and we should be calling for change.
I think that definitely was seemingly a wake-up call for the data collecting agencies in every kind of sense, both private and otherwise, in that, like, yeah, why are you holding on to that data for so long? Data is not, I read a great line around the midst of all the Optus stuff, which is data is not gold, data is uranium. Data used to be perceived as the most valuable thing on the planet, but if you hold on to it long enough, it will burn you and it will cause issues for anyone that holds on to it. So,
especially if you don't know what you've got. I mean, you've got companies that, you know, people change roles, they get new employees. Some of them actually don't even have any visibility on what they're storing or where or what systems they've got and what talks to each other. It's quite a big undertaking to do an audit of your data.
that governmental response to shifting the consumer ability to right to be forgotten, you know, the new privacy laws, kind of similar to what GDPR has been doing for quite some time around the right to erasure, right to rectification, all of those types of things, I feel is a very welcome part of the Privacy Act in my esteem, because it will allow people to decide who gets their data as opposed to just this, I hope for the best and let's fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a, consumer and personal perspective, I love that point. As someone, helping people operate the universities, the CISOs and CIOs, I feel very sorry for them and shudder at the work ahead for them to implement that type of practice. It's going to be a big change for a lot of businesses, but absolutely worth it, I think. And we need to start just doing things differently and trying new things in this sense.
To that point of OHS, right? No one talked about ergonomics and your monitor being this far from your hand and things like that. But now that's you get a checklist when you walk into the role. You make sure the thing is, it's a core part of every industry, irrespective if you're privatized or government sponsored or whatever it may be. So I hope cyber does kind of move in that similar fashion, because as evidenced by this conversation, I think people are very interested in ways to move that needle forward, but just kind of limited by the resources, the people that they can actively engage with within their audiences to get that kind of evolution occurring. But
just like health and safety, people need to want to change. Sorry, like their well-being. Or
absolutely.
Was talking about, if they don't want to change their health or their diet, you can't force them. And it's the same as cyber. Claire will see it in her role. If someone doesn't want to protect their information, you can't force it, but it does keep the business at risk. So as the business, they need to assess, is this employee someone, that is worth that risk, or what's going on in that sense, because it's the business exposure in the end of the day.
And for an individual, it's quite triggering as well. Usually people won't take action until something goes wrong. So people won't check their diet until they have a heart attack or some, autoimmune disease crops up. They'll only do things once there's a consequence that's in their face. And I think that's a lot of it is the same with personal data, at least.
For sure. We see that as well at companies. You don't have money to implement cybersecurity controls until you have an incident, and suddenly you're drowning in money, right? And it happens every day. I hear it almost weekly that we had no money to implement MFA, but we've had an incident and now we've got MFA on everyone. And
an incident occurred in the supply chain that we could have been hit by, or a partner industry that we're competing with, they got hit, so we better shore up. Yeah, it's interesting, that whole, if you want to get someone excited about a disaster recovery, you burn down the business across the street, and that kind of highlights, okay, well, maybe we should consider that. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Based on all of that conversation, we do have some informal questions from the larger group that we work with here at Friendly Phishing. Should you don't mind me throwing out a few questions? One line is sufficient. I mean, they're very casual conversations, but rapid fire, FAM corner cues. In line with all these conversations about breaches and stuff, what has shocked you the most over your roles in the last 5 years or decade around whether it be a breach or someone getting so excited about a thing that you didn't think they'd be excited about? Like, what has shocked you the most about being in cybersecurity over the last 5 to 10 years?
Ooh. Are you good, Nikki? Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Oh, yeah, I don't mind. I don't know. That's a tricky one to answer. I don't think anything's really shocked me, but I think,
wow.
I mean, the main thing is probably delving into the international landscape a bit more, and just really eye-opening to see different countries and how they operate, and, how really tricky it is for politicians to work in that space. You've got sanctions, you've got different things going on at multiple levels. So it is a very complex environment, and digital has just opened it up, right, and exploded, because suddenly, before we had to get a boat or a plane or somewhere to travel, but now you can talk to anyone around the world, wherever. And it's just made it an international space instead of country focused. And so that for me has been the most eye-opening.
And everyone's got a different approach. I mean, the EU versus the US versus Australia is even just our take on Gen AI and the systems that we create around Gen AI. Like, that's kind of very different in the approaches that they've taken as government. So I can imagine trying to align to every stakeholder's view on how things should be done is an entirely complicated exercise.
The human species, it just seems so weird. We seem to just want to fight each other and cause problems, right?
Way.
Why aren't we all in harmony and working together? Yes.
What about you, Claire?
I think I'm probably more easily shocked than Nikki. So the things shock me in cyber. But I think probably the thing that shocks me most is international student scams that we're seeing across Australia. And that's just because, they're very vulnerable. I've traveled a lot, and, and I was pretty naive when I was younger. I still feel quite naive now. But I can kind of see where the position that they're in, and, they're vulnerable and they're being taken advantage of. And, we've heard of large sums of money being taken off these students. And it's just, it's shocking that people are actually out there wanting to do this and targeting these people.
It speaks to really the core of like the scammer ethos, right? Is like, we will aim for the
most vulnerable,
the least amount of effort for the highest gain. So if that happens to be elder people that have retirement savings, whether it's students that have large sums of money because they're looking to move intercontinentally, we will hone in those like parts of society to get the least amount of effort, most of the reward for our buck, irrespective of the morality behind it, which is quite like indicative of why I think people are so passionate about the other side of this staying secure, this protecting others, is that really riles me up. Like, that personally is an affront to my worldview. So like, that's part of the reason why I'm so happy and proud to be doing the work I'm doing, is being able to in any way add to the protection and antithetical behavior that is that's occurring in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the international student scam, is it more them making promises upon delivery of funds that once they land in Australia, they'll have a secure university thing? Or is it more around the placements, like accommodations and things like that?
I think the housing one's quite bad, isn't it?
Yeah, the housing one is prolific, but there's lots. The one we're seeing where they seem to get the most money out of the students is and you probably received these phone calls yourself, where it's somebody phoning you up. It's an automated call, and they say, press 1 to talk in English, press 2 for Chinese. And as soon as they press 2 for Chinese, the scam starts, because they only want Chinese speaking students. And then they'll get the students, they'll tell them that they've been involved in something that they shouldn't have been, and they need to pay this money for that person to look into it and protect them and keep them out of prison. They often pretend that they are from the police or from government agencies, and so they're just really scaring the students, and especially with some cultures where they're brought up to not question authority. It's very difficult for us to get across that this is a scam. It's not real. But there's the rental properties, that's scams where the property doesn't exist. There's all sorts of scams going off targeting students. It's very sad.
Very sad, and it just focusing on like culturally cultural minorities and people that aren't as culturally au fait with the way things are done in Australia, or looking to set up new lives. Like, it's just so sick as a way to target people, really. Like,
it is.
Yeah. On a more positive note, you've both carried out a range of initiatives over the course of your careers. Can either of you tell me what you're most proud about and why?
Right now, I'm judging for the Young ICT Explorers program. And so these are people at any point in high school who have developed sort of ICT projects and with a positive application and primarily. And it's just amazing to see, someone in grade 1 and their worldview, and they've developed, like a sustainable watering system for plants, and they've put a bit of code in, and super
There's
cute.
hope for us yet.
Yeah, there is. And I think this generation, I mean, they're technical, as Claire was saying, you know, they're very technical. They're on iPads from the minute out of the womb, pretty much, for a lot of people, but, you know, they're very involved in it. And I think there is a lot of hope. I see some of the things coming out from, you know, the senior students, which I just look at it with my mouth open. They're amazing and incredible. And, you know, definitely not things I was doing in grade 11 or 12. So that's been just amazing, and a bit of give back to, you know, the youth. I think just like when CommBank targeted the youth with those Dolomite accounts years ago to get all the customers for that, I think getting through to the youth and getting them involved and making this positive change from that point, I think has, you know, application for the next few decades.
I still have my account that I was given as a child from Dolomites. It's still one of my active accounts.
Me too, right? I think we all just got sucked in and we've just retained them. Yeah, it's a great marketing ploy. Kudos to them.
Oh, it was because you got the
Get 'em
pencil
young.
case and yeah, the little toys, and they were so cute.
That's also very exciting to know that others are, you know, getting so into it from such an early age, because you're right, that will pay dividends. Like, it'll snowball effect into uplifting that standard we talked about before for everyone, because it's just the excitement and passion that kind of they have for it from such a young age. Claire, any things that you're most proud of in your initiatives?
Yeah, in cyber world, I think it would just be when we get an email or a message sent through just saying thank you, because we do make a difference. It does sometimes feel like we're tearing our hair out because it's very slow, but we are making a difference just by even piquing somebody's interest just slightly so they can Google it themselves and think, what can I do to keep myself safe? But we have received lots of emails and messages saying, you know, that was awesome. Like, normally, one message that I do remember, they said, normally I hear these kind of talks and I feel overwhelmed and I want to just go and run off and live in the middle of nowhere and turn off all technology and just bury myself somewhere. And they said, but you've made it really achievable, what we need to do. And it's still scary, but it's achievable. And so that's really nice. I think that's really good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's about breaking down those barriers, because
Yeah.
it's a requisite skill set. We all live in a digital society. We have to be united in the understanding that our information's out there and how
Yeah.
can we best protect it. So if they can't engage with the content you're trying to give them, or they tune out or get overwhelmed by it, no one gets protected by that. So I love that kind of sentiment of
One at a time.
one at a time. Yeah, that's it. You know, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
friendly
Like
phishing
that.
are very, like, in creating the course material with friendly phishing with our learning experience and design team, and Beck and the marketing team kind of pushing it out to the wider audiences. Like, I feel great about the keeping people safe, like educating them to then educate others. We put out
Yeah.
things like family and friends for free for others to share with their families and their friends, to share that kind of spark of interest.
So we're not to be security influencers.
Yes.
Goes out of term, you know. I mean, we've got influencers all over social media. Let's get them in the cyberspace as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
But yeah,
I
I think
think you'd be perfect.
thank you. You're both doing an amazing job with the culture perspective. CAUDIT partnered with many universities, and I can imagine you're privy to many of the initiatives that similarly to Claire is rolling out, Nikki. And I'm just really thankful that there are people in these roles kind of pushing that dial forward as it were.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, guys. It's been a real pleasure hearing about all your collaboration and initiatives. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. It's been really good. And thank you for being so kind to us and not kind of, I don't know,
Not at all, of
too many
course.
curly questions.
Not at all. We really appreciate your time. If anyone is interested in either CAUDIT or from the UQ perspective, getting more involved in cybersecurity or any of these initiatives, who should they reach out to? How can they get involved?
Yeah, either of us. I think you could probably just break down on LinkedIn, or reach out if you're within a university. You know, reach out to your CISO or CIO if you know who they are. Always happy to have a chat and help out the universities.
United in knowledge, we will be stronger, I guess. Hey.
Absolutely. I think I've got a a great African proverb on that, which I only heard the other week, but it was so awesome. So if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. I like that. And you guys probably have already heard that before, but I've never heard it. So
No,
it was
that's
really
beautiful.
good.
It truly encapsulates to me the sentiment of cyber is you can know everything, but ultimately the rest of your org could get done. So the idea is if we can't go together, we're never going to get where we want to go. So I love that.
Beautiful.
Perfect way to send it up, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode of Bites with Beck and Benji.